Hi, I'm Max Ruthenberg-Marshall, divorce attorney and founder of Porchlight. Today, we're going to be talking about whether or not you should change your name when you get divorced. This is an incredibly personal decision, but one that you'll want to think through carefully. You will want to make a decision before your divorce is finalized because it's really easy for your attorney to just include your name change in your divorce paperwork. But if you wait until after your divorce is completed, then you have to bring a whole nother court action just to change your name. So we've put together a list of factors to help you reach a decision. The first thing to consider is how long you've had your current last name. If you've only had it for a few years, you might not feel that strongly connected to it, and your friends and connections might actually think of you more by your previous last name than by your current last name. So it might make sense to change back. On the other hand, if you've had your current last name for decades and pretty much everyone you're in contact with knows you by that last name, it might make more sense to keep it because you also might have some personal attachment to it yourself, more so than you would if you'd only had it for a few years. Another thing to consider is how changing your name will impact your career. If you've invested a lot of time and effort into building a professional network under your current last name, it might create some challenges if you decide to change back to your previous last name. You'll want to consider whether or not name recognition is important in the field that you work in or within your company for you to succeed and advance your career. Even if it is important, if you want to change back to your previous last name, there are ways that you can do that and make the transition a little bit easier and maintain your professional reputation. One way to do this is to reference your old last name in any current paperwork. So something like your email signature block or any professional networking profiles that you have. You can put your married last name in parentheses, but use the last name that you've now legally returned to so that people have the opportunity to make that connection and transition your name in their mind. Another thing to think about is if you have children, whether or not you want to have the same last name as them. I emphasize the want part here because people come up with a lot of reasons connected to their children as to why they're going to keep their last name, and they often push their own needs and desires down to the bottom of the list of priorities. One thing that people tell me a lot is because of the logistics, they want to have the same name as their children. They think it's going to be too confusing for the school or doctor's offices or extracurricular providers to figure things out. But the thing is, we have so many blended families these days and lots of kids who don't share a last name with one parent. These organizations are easily able to make the connection of which child and parent belong together. So the logistics aren't that difficult to manage. Another reason that people tell me that they're keeping their last name for their children is they believe it would be emotionally difficult for their children if they had a different last name than them. The thing is, most people don't base that belief on conversations with their children. They're generally just making assumptions about how their children feel. And sometimes the children don't actually have a strong opinion. So depending on the age of your children, you might want to have an age-appropriate conversation with them about what their feelings are regarding the possibility of you changing your last name. Their reaction might surprise you. Even if your children do feel strongly that they would like you to keep the same last name as them, ultimately, this is the last name that you have to wear and carry through life. So if it is not the right last name for you, you can make the decision to change back to your previous name, and your children will survive. As we've said, there are many children who do not share the same last name as their parents, and they turn out just fine. Another factor is what the reasons were for you deciding to change your name in the first place when you got married. Some of those reasons might be applicable to whether or not you should change your name now. For example, if one of your reasons for changing your last name at marriage was that you wanted a symbolic representation of starting a new phase of your life, that can also apply to changing your name after divorce. On the other hand, if you never felt strongly connected to your birth last name or whatever last name it was that you had at the time you got married, then changing back might not make sense for you. If that was never really a strong part of your identity, you might feel more connected and identify more strongly with your current last name. A final consideration is whether or not you actually want to put forth the effort to change your last name. As I mentioned, to legally change your name, it's actually pretty simple. It's just one sentence that gets written into your divorce decree. But then you do have to do the reverse process of what you did when you got married to get your name changed with all sorts of legal entities and other organizations you're connected to. So you're going to have to change it with Social Security, change it on your passport, get all your financial records changed. Even any professional or personal organizations that you're involved in, you're going to want to update those records, and that can be a lot of administrative work. So if you know you just don't want to deal with that, then don't change your last name back. Keep it to your current last name. Also, if you want to change your name, but you just know you are not the type of person who's going to get around to doing all those things, it might just be more practical to keep your current last name. It can be challenging to have your last name changed back to your previous name in some situations, but not others. That can just lead to complications. There is no one right decision on whether or not you should change your last name, but it is something that you should give careful consideration to. Regardless of what you decide about your last name, Porchlight is here to help you navigate through your divorce so you can move forward with your life, regardless of what name you do that under.